In the early 1900s, a man named Walter Rothschild, kind of a weirdo, really into animals, drove through London in a carriage pulled by zebras. He was on his way to Buckingham Palace. The zebras had harnesses on and they were trained enough to pull the cart. People had cameras out. Crowds came to watch. For one afternoon, it really looked like zebras could do what horses do. But it's not actually that simple. Rothschild himself never bought it. He still thought zebras were too aggressive. One of his zebras killed a groom. He never even tried to ride them. They are too grumpy, too dangerous for that. That's the Barbarian anti-horse, the classic horse-like animal we never turned into something you can ride to work or use on a farm. A lot of people say the main reason zebras were never tamed is that Africa never developed the skills to tame animals. So when you look at zebras, they look like perfect work animals. They're a kind of horse, they're tough, and people had been living near them in Africa for thousands of years. So it's easy to walk away thinking Africans just weren't capable of it. But that's not really what happened. Take donkeys, for example. People first started taming them in Northeast Africa thousands of years ago. From there, they slowly spread into the Middle East and then out across the rest of the world. Over time, they became one of the most important work animals on the planet, carrying loads, helping on farms, and moving people from place to place. And every donkey we see today goes back to that early domestication in Africa. Horses are a different story. They made it to Africa too, but not in the same way. They didn't start out there as a local domestication. People first tamed horses on the grasslands of Europe and Asia, long before they became common in Africa. When they did show up in Africa, it was mostly through trade and war, brought in from elsewhere, already domesticated. They weren't bred from wild herds out on the savannah. Zebras are the odd one out. They're native to Africa, built like a horse, and tough enough for the savannah. People had been living near them for thousands of years, and still nobody ever turned them into farm animals. Okay, so Africans could tame animals. Donkeys show that. With zebras, the story went another way. For thousands of years, people mostly hunted them for meat and hides. People did try to tame them too. We'll get to that. But in the end, the animal itself was the problem. Some people hear this and say, wait, there are zebras in zoos all over the world. Doesn't that mean we've tamed them? Well, you can keep them. They often live 35 or even 40 years in zoos, much longer than in the wild. They can even breed and keep zoo populations going. So on the surface, zebras seem fine with captivity, almost like farm animals, but they're not. For zebras, the line stops here. Working them like a horse is a whole different thing. Keeping zebras in zoos takes a massive amount of work. You're not just throwing hay in a pen like a barn horse. You need big grassland-style exhibits and herd groups, so they can live something like zebras actually do in the wild. You need tall, strong fencing. You need barns with shift alleys and solid walls. Also, keepers can care for them without walking in there with them. Keepers can spend months or years on training through the fence, teaching zebras to come when called, touch a stick for a treat, and cope with everyday zoo life. Puzzle feeders, varied ground, places to hide, just to keep stress down and get a basic health check. A lot of vet work still means darting them down. Modern zoos pour enormous money and staff time into all of this, and that's how you get zebras living 35 or 40 years and breeding. So a zebra in a zoo is still a wild animal behind a fence, sometimes a dangerous one. See, there's a difference. Taming an animal for real means changing the whole kind of animal over a long time. You breed them in captivity, you keep picking the calmer ones. After many generations, they actually work for people, carrying stuff, giving rides, pulling a plow, and zebras never even get to the first step. So when people actually try to control a zebra, grab it, tie it up, force it to cooperate, it often panics like its life is on the line. To us, that can look wildly over the top, almost stupid. Watch them on the savannah and it's a different story. Plain zebras live in tight family groups. One sounds the alarm and the rest respond. When predators close in, they bunch up and shield the foals. A stallion may turn and fight to buy the other's time. That's coordination, not stupidity. So the problem isn't intelligence, it's the environment. Zebras live on African grasslands where almost every big predator wants to eat them. Lions, hyenas, leopards, cheetahs. And for a long time, people with weapons too. The instincts that work on the savannah make them run first, keep looking around, and treat anything new like a threat, almost a kind of hypersensitivity. On the savannah, anything that grabs you and holds you down is usually trying to eat you. Zebras aren't dumb. They aren't built for people forcing them to cooperate. But people still tried to tame them anyway, over and over. Some tries were just for show. People put zebras in circus acts and zoo performances. Sometimes someone rode one long enough for a photograph. That was the same idea as Rothschild's zebra carriage. The same goal was to impress the audience. And people still do it today. But plenty of others cared more about farm work and patrol rides. In the early days in southern Africa, under colonial rule, farmers, British settlers, and soldiers didn't just want something exotic to show off. They needed something to replace horses that kept dying from local diseases. Zebras already lived on that savanna and were already used to the environment. They ate local grass, handled the heat, and the local bugs that kept killing imported horses. So people tried the obvious thing. They tried to plow with them and ride them on patrol. And the same thing kept happening. None of it worked well enough to replace a horse. The zebra would freak out. The harness would break. Someone would get kicked. None of it went as smooth as a show. When people pushed harder, the damage wasn't always a kick or a broken harness. The panic can run so high that muscles start breaking down inside the body. Acid builds up in the blood. The kidneys can fail. Sometimes the zebra wouldn't even survive the stress. Some zebras died in transport. Some died in the pen before anyone even started training them. Around the time of the Boer War, Europeans kept trying to use zebras like horses. At first, it often looked promising. They would catch one, put a harness on it, and walk a few steps. Then something would go wrong. People and zebras got hurt or even died. Then they gave up. But real taming isn't a show for an audience. It's a super long process. People breed the calmer ones generation after generation. Like with modern farm horses, it takes millions of animals over thousands of years. Zebras never got anywhere near that. And that failure wasn't unique to zebras. They aren't the only ones that never got tamed. Look at the whole horse family. Horses, donkeys, zebras, and wild asses all belong to the same group. Only regular horses and donkeys ever became normal farm animals worldwide, and the other kinds in the family stay wild. The stripes make zebras stand out, but that's not really the point. Take Mongolian wild horses, for example. They really mess with people's heads. They look like light brown, stocky horses you'd see on a farm. But they're also the last truly wild horses. They are the closest living relatives to the horses we use today. Humans hunted them. People shot them and captured foals for zoos. For a while, only about a dozen were left alive. At last, people managed to save these wild horses, but they never managed to turn them into workhorses. They're too wild to handle, like most of the horse family. Zebras aren't the only ones that stay wild, and even the horses in our barns today, we might have gotten lucky to tame them. It wasn't a sure thing. And the story of how humans tame them looks more like an accident. About 5,500 years ago, people in what's now Kazakhstan were rounding up wild horses and milking them. That sounds like the start of horse taming. But then researchers tested horses from that time period and found something off. Those horses are closer to Mongolian wild horses. They are not the ancestors of most of today's riding horses. Until hundreds of years later, the horses that actually took over the world showed up. A different wild horse group appeared on the western grasslands. People wanted chariots and soldiers on horseback. This type just worked. They are so useful and spread fast all over the world. So even the horse in your barn wasn't one clean success story. Most male horses alive today trace back to a tiny number of stallions from long ago. The genetics show how narrow that opportunity was. It's like a handful of dads for almost every farm horse in the world. This outcome shows how hard wild horses were to tame. Getting the horses we have looks more like an accident than a plan. If we might have gotten lucky with taming horses, a zebra staying wild is a lot easier to understand. It isn't the weird outcome. Most of the horse family stays wild too. In the same situation, they never entered the long process of breeding calmer animals generation after generation. Especially the quagga. It was a kind of zebra with stripes in front and plain brown in back. The photo is from 1870. It's the only known photograph of a living quagga. One branch of the zebra family erased. In our minds, zebras seem common. They don't feel like a protected animal, but the zebras still out there aren't all in the same shape. There are 3 zebra species, and their populations aren't the same. Plain zebras are the most numerous, still in the hundreds of thousands. But some herds are shrinking. The species counts as near threatened. Mountain zebras are worse off. They're vulnerable, with far fewer animals left. Gravy zebras are down to about 2,000 breeding adults. They're endangered. The quagga was the extreme case. That line is already gone. That's the Barbarian anti-horse, the horse-shaped animal we never turned into work. If you want more, subscribe for the next video.